Hello, Indian mythology fans. My name is Sonika, and I am the author of the book Who God Really Is. Today, I bring you a story of India's own Cinderella, a story that originated well before Cinderella was imagined by Disney. It is a story of love found, lost, and found again. As always, after completing the story, I will teach you the very useful lessons of this ancient Hindu myth that you can still apply to your modern life in the 21st century. Now, Hinduism is sometimes called a complicated religion. It's why I wrote the book Who God Really Is, a book in which the principles of Hinduism are best understood and God is explained through a modern rational lens. Do grab your copy on Amazon today. Let me tell you the story of Shakuntala and King Dushyanta now. Sage Vishwamitra had gone into deep meditation. During this period, the celestial nymph Manaka descended from the heavens at the divine command of the gods to disturb his penance. The two met and engaged in a passionate love affair. As a result, Shakuntala was born. Vishwamitra, however, was displeased and abandoned both Menaka and the newborn girl. The mother and child were discovered by the wise sage Ganva, who took a Shakuntala under his care, raising her in his hermitage. Growing up in the serene and beautiful surroundings of the forest, Shakuntala became a model of virtue, adorned with grace, simplicity, and inner beauty. She spent her days living amidst the natural splendor of the forest, performing her daily rituals and engaging in peaceful meditation. Shakuntala essentially grew up immersed in nature and spiritual learning. One day, King Dushyanta, the ruler of Hastinapura, went on a hunting journey in the forest. As his fleet of horses galloped through the woods, they arrived at the hermitage of Sage Ganva, where Shakuntala was living, of course. Despite his royal status and duties, Dushyanta felt a deep sense of peace and serenity in the presence of the hermitage, which intrigued him. When he first saw Shakuntala, he was instantly struck by her exceptional beauty and charm. Shakuntala, in turn, was equally captivated by him. Their eyes met, and in that moment of silent recognition, love blossomed between them. It was love at first sight, the Romeo and Juliet of ancient India, indeed. King Dushyanta, deeply moved by her presence, spoke to Shakuntala, and their mutual affection grew during the time they spent in the peaceful surroundings of Sage Ganva's ashram. They began exchanging soft words of warmth and admiration. Conversations in the tranquil grove, combined with the beauty of nature, sparked a profound love between King Dushyanta and Shakuntala. As this love flourished, worldly titles and royal responsibilities faded before the overwhelming power of true affection. As their love deepened, the king and Shakuntala, enamored with each other, entered into a Gandharva marriage, a type of celestial union which is sacred and based solely on mutual love and consent without the need for elaborate rituals. This form of marriage, celebrated among celestial beings and mortals alike, underscored the purity and spontaneity of their bond. King Dushyanta then had to leave for his kingdom. Though duty-bound by his responsibilities as a ruler, he vowed to return, formally marry Shakuntala, and make her his queen. As a tangible promise of their love, he gave her a precious signet ring, a symbol meant to guarantee his eventual return. It was a promise of unbreakable commitment between the two lovers. Shakuntala, carrying the child of Dushyanta, remained in the hermitage, awaiting the king's return. Despite waiting in solitude, time passed with no word from Dushyanta, and she began to have doubts. As her pregnancy progressed, it became difficult for Shakuntala to continue waiting without any support. Shakuntala's emotional turmoil grew. As she spent countless days immersed in thoughts of her husband, Shakuntala accidentally became lost in her inner world. Sage Durvasa, who visited the ashram, attempted to speak with Shakuntala, but she was so distracted with thoughts of Dushyanta that she failed to properly acknowledge this powerful sage of Hindu mythology, known for his sensitivity and stubbornness. Wrathfully, sage Durvasa cursed Shakuntala, saying that the one she loved would also forget her, just as she had forgotten him at that moment. He added that she would be forgotten by her beloved husband until he encountered a token that could restore his memory of her. Shakuntala was filled with profound regret and sorrow upon hearing of the curse, but she was still confident in the power of King Dushyanta's love for her. In her quiet desolation, Shakuntala later gave birth to a son named Bharata, whose destiny it was to give rise to a great lineage and ultimately become synonymous with the very name that people and politicians even in this modern day assign to India, Bharat. In due course, Shakuntala decided to make her way to the king's palace to remind him of his promise. Shakuntala made her way to Hastinapura, carrying their child. One day, as she crossed the Ganges River or the Ganga River, on her journey to her husband, the ring that King Dushyanta had given her slipped from her finger and was carried away by the river currents. Despite Shakuntala's most thorough search, she was unable to recover her token of love. When Shakuntala arrived at King Dushyanta's court to reunite with him, she presented herself and told the king of their Gandharva marriage. However, to her shock, Dushyanta did not recognize or remember her at all. Sage Durvasa's curse had been activated. The king's memory of his love and marriage to Shakuntala was erased. Despite her tearful pleas, Dushyanta remained indifferent and cold, unable to recall their shared moments. Shakuntala was heartbroken, feeling abandoned by the man she loved and devastated by the loss of her ring, which had become a symbol of their bond. In her despair, Shakuntala returned to the ashram with Bharata, carrying the weight of the unrealized promise and her grief. Years passed, and the king slowly began to wonder about the strange woman he had dismissed, feeling inexplicably troubled. One day, a fisherman found the ring that the king had given to his lover and brought it to the court. The king was the object that would break Sage Durvasa's curse and trigger the return of the king's memory of his courtship with Shakuntala. As soon as the king saw it and recognized the inscription, divine intervention lifted the fog of amnesia that had clouded his mind. King Dushyanta's heart was filled with remorse and regret for having forgotten his beloved Shakuntala. To restore what was lost, he embarked on a journey to find his wife. When he finally reached the hermitage where Shakuntala lived with their child Bharata, the reunion was emotional. It was marked by profound recognition and emotional catharsis. Upon presenting the ring as a token of his memory's return, King Dushyanta understood the depth of their love and his mistake. Shakuntala, though initially hesitant to embrace Dushyanta, realized that the king's love for her was true. She, now dignified in her endurance and quietly raising Bharata, was finally restored to her rightful place by the side of her husband. Their son Bharata was accepted as the rightful heir to the throne by King Dushyanta. This royal reunion was celebrated as a divine affirmation of their bond. This was the story of King Dushyanta and Shakuntala's love from classical Hindu literature. While its roots trace back to the Mahabharata epic of ancient India, this Indian myth is most famously immortalized in Kalidasa's play Abhijana Shakuntalam, or The Recognition of Shakuntala in English. Kalidasa was a classical Sanskrit author who is often considered to be ancient India's greatest poet and playwright. Now, what does God want us to recognize in the 21st century through this ancient Hindu myth? The story of Shakuntala and King Dushyanta teaches us that we have the choice as to whether or not we are going to allow the mindset programs or intelligence imprints that we form early on in our lives to shape the way we approach personal relationship challenges later on in our lives. Shakuntala was abandoned by her father, as was her mother Menaka. She then experienced abandonment from her husband. She allowed herself to experience tremendous despair as she did not hear anything from King Dushyanta after he left her ashram and returned to his royal duties. Our early experiences with love, acceptance, and even neglect lay down mental templates or mindset programs in us that will significantly influence how we connect with others, but only if we allow these programs to take root in our minds. Once established, these ingrained programs can either open our hearts to authentic connection or, like the curse of forgetfulness in this Hindu tale, cloud our ability to remember and nurture the true essence of healthy relationships. Now, what is remarkable is that Shakuntala could have remained hesitant toward the king's desire to reunite with her at the end of the story, but she dissolved her hesitancy and opened her heart up to him. Also, keep in mind that King Dushyanta's quote-unquote abandonment of Shakuntala was different from that of her father, sage Vishwamitra. The king's abandonment was an unwilling one. His forgetfulness did not come forth from his own will. It came from an angry person's curse. Shakuntala's father, on the other hand, willingly abandoned his daughter. And an element of reality that is of goodness, for example, the genuine romantic love of a Gandharva marriage. So an element of reality that is of goodness, but that is also corrupted unwillingly, is always restored by the divine grace of God in some way, shape, or form, as long as this restoration is prayed for and smart efforts are made toward it by the relevant conscious beings. God cannot help us to the best possible extent if we do not ask Him to, if we do not try to build a relationship with Him based on truth. In this great Indian myth, we also can observe that a woman born out of a wedlock has meaning, and she too has a right to love and be loved. Such a woman too has the potential to achieve a Gandharva marriage, which is a marriage of true mental, emotional, physical, and intelligence unity with another human being. I discuss the dynamics of this kind of love or marriage using the famous Adam and Eve story in my book, What is God Good For? Evil, Karma, Sin, and Suffering, correctly explained finally. I strongly encourage you to grab your copy on Amazon today. Shakuntala's reunion with her husband at the end of the story is divinely approved, as I stated earlier on in this podcast episode. Thus, even God does not shun a woman born out of wedlock for the circumstances that she had no control over early on in her life. The story of Shakuntala and King Dushyanta is indeed revolutionary in this regard, as it shatters taboos often found in the historically conservative Indian culture. These are taboos that are born from meanings created out of thin air by human intelligence. In my book, What is God Good For? Evil, Karma, Sin, and Suffering, Correctly Explained, finally, I explain the human minds of Adam and Eve are essentially adding greater and greater layers of differentiation upon the fundamental fabric or intelligent design of the earth experience. They imbue differences with meanings that are born from id and ego. In doing so, the humans begin creating walls of separation between their own natures and that of God. In other words, they themselves become more imperfect, while God, who is an all good, always good, or completely good essence, remains as he is. And this is exactly what happens when we shun those who have no control over what we are shunning. Okay? To understand more, grab your copy of my book on Amazon today. The ring in particular takes on a highly metaphorical meaning in the story of Shakuntala and Dushyanta. Given by Dushyanta, it serves as a tangible symbol of his union with his wife, a constant reminder of commitment and shared love. However, its loss symbolized the potential for misunderstanding and disconnection when those symbols of trust are obscured by negative conditioning or past wounds. In our own lives, these mindset programs, formed through early attachments, traumas, or even societal expectations, can cause us to misinterpret or undervalue the important tokens of love and commitment. Such misplacements in our landscape may lead us to doubt our partner's intentions or to question our own worth, ultimately straining the bond we share. Yet, the eventual reunion of Shakuntala and Dushyanta illustrates the transformative power of fighting for who and what we love. Shakuntala could have let time pass even further and not made the effort to fight for reunion with her rightful husband. She could have stayed in meditation in the forest and just waited it out. But here in this story, interestingly enough, we observe how even anxiety and inner tensions play a key role in compelling us to take the actions that we need to take in order for happiness, contentment, and order to be restored in our lives. Then again, in that anxious state, Shakuntala also lost her grip on the ring that she absolutely needed in order to make the king remember her again and break the angry sage Durvasa's curse. Because she allowed herself to be so taken by her internal state and her anxious thoughts about her husband, Shakuntala ended up delaying the speed at which she reunited with the king. So what this Hindu myth is teaching us is that while even anxiety and internal tensions play a key role in compelling us to take the actions that we need to take to solve our problems, we still need to develop an internal stable core to which we remain anchored and out of which we react in unfavorable times. Shakuntala did not do so, and this caused her to lose the ring in her nervous state. This core that I mention here has nothing to do with our bellies or guts. It has everything to do with our intelligences. I speak about this energetic core in my book, Who God Really Is. In the book, I write, our intelligence gradients or energetic anatomies experience subtle changes and dramatic shifts throughout our existences, and thus their quote-unquote color codes are in constant flux. The specific emotions and thoughts that a human experiences are interrelated and together provide an indication as to which dimensions of intelligence that person primarily adheres to or is of. Do grab your copy of Who God Really Is on Amazon to understand more. The story of Shakuntala and King Dushyanta alludes to the mindset patterns we develop in personal relationships, particularly around love, trust, and communication. Just as Shakuntala was deeply engrossed in thoughts of her beloved and failed to notice sage Durvasa, we often get lost in our internal narratives, expectations, assumptions, and emotional states without realizing how they impact our interactions with other human beings. In relationships, this manifests as emotional unavailability or miscommunication, leading to misunderstandings. The sage's curse is a warning sign for us in the modern age to never forget how unresolved emotional wounds and subconscious conditioning always end up clouding our ability to value the existence of love, even when it is staring right at us. In this Indian myth, the wound was inherent in sage Durvasa, and the king was subconsciously conditioned by the curse. The loss of the ring in the river is a powerful metaphor for how we sometimes misplace the noticeable symbols of commitment and trust in our relationships. Just as Shakuntala's ring was the key to Dushyanta's memory, in real life, small yet meaningful gestures, consistent affection, shared experiences, and open communication serve as emotional anchors. When these are lost or taken for granted, the bond between two people weakens, and doubts or misunderstandings creep in. This story from Hindu mythology reminds us that external circumstances, like the river washing away the ring, and internal struggles, like Dushyanta's forgotten love, can create unintended emotional distance, reinforcing our need to actively nurture and protect the foundations of our relationships. The guidance here is to pay attention to what you absolutely need to overcome your problems and in order for you to embrace or be loved. Shakuntala could have avoided losing the ring in the river if she was just paying more attention to it, despite being in a nervous state. When King Dushyanta's memory was restored by the ring, it paved the way for reconciliation and renewed trust. Inherent to this ring is what defines God ultimately, and this is love. So it is as if one of the most important qualities or attributes of God caused the king's memory of his wife to return to him. Similarly, in our modern world today, by subconsciously addressing and reprogramming our mindset patterns, specifically through the active worship of God or simple Hindu mantra meditations, we can overcome the barriers erected by past conditioning. This healing allows us to reconnect with the authentic, untainted aspects of our relationships, fostering deeper intimacy and mutual respect. The story of Shakuntala and King Dushyanta from Indian mythology teaches us that love, though tested by separation, forgetfulness, and external challenges, can be rekindled when, number one, both individuals are willing to make the journey or effort toward each other, and number two, are willing to see beyond illusions. In personal relationships, this means working through emotional baggages, reestablishing trust, and remembering what it means to be loved and to love. If you have found it somewhat difficult to understand God well through the often complex Hindu stories or scriptures, then do read my book, Who God Really Is, on Amazon. It is a book in which the principles of Hinduism are best understood and God is explained through a modern, rational lens. Thank you for listening, and I'll speak with you in the next episode.